Hey, have you ever wanted to start a podcast? I've been trying to get up this podcast off the ground for years and I've used many different apps to record the episode, to get my show to the people, and trying to make money off the podcast. Well, now there's only one real way to do that, and that's Anchor. Anchor is your one stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise in your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now, reading this ad. I use Anchor for instantly recording my episodes in the app, and I also like the features on it, like bringing people into your show for other opinions and guests. So if you always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and all the other podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start.
Hello and welcome to the Greater Gstlsp Sports Podcast, part of Street G Records LLC. Ryan Bosley here with you. Now, I'm not going to try to do this every show, but it seems like almost every show I do, we got to do a state of the podcast address. If you noticed, if you heard the beginning there, the name has changed. It's now called the Greater Gstlsp Sports Podcast. There's going to be something set up with the network. It's just not going to be called Greater Gstlsp Sports Network anymore. It's going to be called something else. See, how I planned this all out was to all get this done really, really quick. And it turns out that it's not that easy. So, as we go on here and here, and this is going to get done every week. I ain't got an exact time set up. I'm going to get it done midweeks. This is probably going to be the time I'm going to put it out, is Wednesday mornings. Get you through the midweek. You know, people don't get to the podcast until probably the weekend because of the work. And by then I get a new podcast ready and blase, there from there. So, as I've said on this podcast 9 billion times before, no matter what it was called, originally called the Sports Blog STL, and been multiple names since then. So, things are changing, but the way I've worked it out is you don't have to deal with anything about trying to find the podcast. It's all in the same spots. You look up, it comes under the same name. If you subscribed to it before, nothing's changed. You're going to see a new logo, which is a pretty nice logo. Not made by me. So, we did get a new Twitter. The Twitter wasn't really the biggest thing I was worried about. It was more where the podcast feed was going. I checked all the podcast feeds earlier, and they're all going to the same spot. So I can't complain about that at all. So the powers that be said, hey, if we're going to do this part of it, we got to change the name of the show. I was iffy on it. I was 50-50 on it. I have no problem with it. And this is generally a St. Louis sports podcast. I mean, that's what it's been the whole time. It started as nothing but St. Louis sports. And as soon as things start picking up, this COVID thing just kills the F out of the podcast. I mean, it really does. If you think about it, it just kills it. Because there's nothing to talk about. And like stuff I talked about before, like the ambush, and all that's shut down. And I think the ambush are playing, but in general, all these sports, and they could get shut down again, which is going to be real fun for stuff to talk about on this podcast. Well, I could talk about the CBA. So, I mean, it's still going to be a weekly thing. If I have to talk a lot of basketball and NFL on here, I mean, they'll be gone too. So, we're just making this better than what it was. This has been the whole plan, is to make it bigger than it was. The whole plan the whole time. Where this started out, from where I started out, I think it was 2014, maybe 2013, when this all started out. The whole thing was to build it. It just never got to that point. And now it's starting to get to a point to build off something. So before I get to rambling on more and more about it and talk about the same thing. So things have changed. A couple things have changed. Twitter, new Twitter, yay. It's under Greater Gstlsp Sports Podcast. Look that up. The Twitter name is Gstlsp. Easy as can be. But I wanted the other one to be, but someone else had it. I mean, whoever would pick that screen name. But so Gstlsp is the Twitter. Gstlsp. You can also find us on YouTube. I didn't get the last podcast up there, but we're still up there. And you can find us at the same places that you found us before on the podcast, on the Apple. I checked Spotify. That's updated everything. I checked Google. That's updated. Apple's being a little slow. They've updated the picture, which is always good. That's usually the hard part, is them accepting the picture. But I didn't see the name change. In the podcast app that I use, which I don't use Google or Apple, I use something else. And the name hasn't changed, but the podcast logo's changed. So sooner or later, I didn't check the description on all of them. I think the description at one point said sports blog. On most of it's changed to Greater STL Sports Podcast. So just fun. It's a lot harder to do this stuff. And I mean, and I wanted to get the podcast done really Monday night. I got drunk Sunday, so that wasn't the funnest thing. I wanted to get up Monday and do it, and being hungover and trying to talk and stay hydrated and stuff, this ain't the biggest, funnest thing to do. So I did some stuff with the updating stuff. We also were waiting on a logo, so just things happen. But greater, Gstlsp, the new Twitter, and we'll get up on Facebook. We'll try to get it to where everything's the same, or at least close, to where you can just type in Gstlsp into Instagram or Facebook and it comes right up. There's a way to do that. I haven't got that far yet. The podcasting, changing the podcast, I didn't have to change the feed, but trying to change the name of the picture, that's all fun in general. Anyways, so let's move on. We're not going to do this every week. I promise there's not going to be a state of the podcast session every week. We're not going to have fireside chats every week about what's going on. Which they're fun. It's easy for me to talk about it. It's easy for me to waste some time about it. But also, I already messed up the Twitter twice. Gstlsp. So sooner or later, you'll hear me say Greater STL Sports Network or the sports blog. Maybe not, because, stuff's moving. So once all this gets figured out and I can say what I want to say without having to worry about... there's some sneaky people out here. This is the funny thing about this whole thing. Is there's literally people out here who will look for what your idea is and go fuck around and pay that money. A little bit of money. To steal your idea. Well, not to steal your idea. To steal the name of your idea. Or watch what you're doing. Or try to get involved in your money somehow. I literally can't put this out just because. Literally just because. I came up with it and I could probably find it and get away with it. It's written down everywhere. There's multiple places where what the company name is. It's everywhere. It's easily findable. But I don't want to say it and then someone be like, oh, that's an easy idea. Blah, blah. And not do nothing with it. Either. And I'm not saying I'm leading the charge and doing a bunch of stuff with this whole thing. But just sit on it until whatever runs out, and then maybe I can get it 2-3 years from now. That just doesn't make any sense to me. If I were to say it, it could literally easily just be taken from me like that. And that's why I haven't said nothing yet. All this stuff's been planned for a while before I came back with doing the podcast. But then you see stuff. You see these motherfuckers trying to be sneaky on the social media. And I cussed twice. Now I already beat the record for the last show. But it pisses me off a little bit. So I could have said it the last show. I could have thrown it out there on Twitter. I could have said, hey, we're probably going to change the name of the... But I want to do these things after I get them done. So I get them done first now. And then now I can say it. Now I can say Greater STL Sports Podcast. I can say Street G Records LLC. I can say all this. Because it's dealt with. See how things aren't as... Like I'm saying, a lot harder than I thought. Aren't as dealt with. And it sucks, man. It really does. And I'm not just talking about, just random people. I'm talking about people on your friends list. Not many of my posts that I post on Facebook go out to the world. Most of them are all friends posts. If I'm even posting. Most of it's mostly kids and memories. Every now and then I'll see a meme I like and post it, which I actually probably post more than I think. But Nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy anymore. But even have people on my little video friends list that's been knocked down and built back up and knocked down and not just by me, but whoever. And literally I could put that on there and lose it like that. Mostly because I'm slow. And there's so much going on. I mean, the last 5 years of my life have been unastonishingly crazy. But it's not an excuse to not get stuff done. And I should have got this stuff done 6 years ago when I first wanted to do it. And it's pure. It's pure not looking into it. I wouldn't say I didn't look into it, but it's pure not acting on looking into stuff, like saying, I'll get it then, I'll do it then, you know. So it sucks that I can't do it. But anyways, Greater STL Sports Podcast. Find us on Twitter, Gstlsp. Everything will be up there. I'll make sure the Twitter's lit up. I'll get a Facebook, which the Twitter was so much easier than what I've had to deal with Facebook. I'm just not... I honestly don't want a Facebook under my name. The only reason Facebook's ever been up is for this podcast. Ever. And then it's up, and then I use it like an idiot. Mostly drunk. So, if I can figure out that, but I'm probably just going to throw a page up and say, here it is, fine, there's the page. Or maybe I'll just make a group page. Who knows? Anyways. Gstlsp, Greater STL Sports Podcast. Look it up. State of the podcast address is now over. Go back to whatever. Fire is going down. Now we can just chill out. Talk about whatever the hell else I want to talk about, which is not this podcast. And one thing I didn't get to talk about on this podcast, just horrible segue. And I might have actually talked about it. But I think in the podcast I did in 2019, which wasn't many, I think I mostly talked Blue Stanley Cup. And I probably talked a lot of cards, but I was watching a lot of sports back then. I might have did the hometown rundown back then. Who knows? I don't really go back and listen to these. I did in the beginning. And that's how the show got better. Now I think I'm at a point to where if I'm going to record, I'm just going to record and talk. But at the time, the XFL wasn't even like the biggest thing in the world because it wasn't coming until February. But I mean, that's June, July. And it's crazy to think that not that far away is going to be their next season in 2023. And I only played part of 2020. It doesn't even seem like that long ago. Now, as much as I had go on, it just seemed like forever. And it really doesn't seem like it was that long ago. I think I did 4 or 5 weeks, 6, 7 weeks, something like that. But at that time, I didn't see a point of talking about it yet. I didn't know what was going on, really. Because you didn't know how big it was going to really be. You kind of heard with McMahon coming out and saying stuff like, he wasn't going to accept these certain kind of players and these certain kind of players. So you kind of thought the league was going to be a little rough, and it was actually halfway decent football. And we probably had the best fan base in the league. I mean, we were going to have 70,000 in that football stadium for the LA Wildcats game. For an XFL game. For a team that Dan Kroenke had nothing to do with. And yeah, we were going to try to fill the dome and prove a point. Which, during the greatest time in the world, the pandemic, wow, I mean, that really, after we didn't even get to play the game. Crazy. But it was something that was interesting to me. Definitely watching the Battlehawks game. They were not like the most offensive team. They weren't, they played regular football. And the games weren't high scoring. It was just fun to watch. I think it was just fun to see the Dome again, and see football in there, and see football in St. Louis, and actually have something to root for. I don't know how big of the chance. I might have watched it if it was on. If Fox 2 was on a Saturday, and there's nothing else on, I probably would have turned in and saw 5 minutes of the XFL. But I watched 60 minutes, or however minutes they played, of XFL football every week that the Battlehawks played. And then, of course, they hit the pandemic. Things go crazy. You got their former commissioner suing Vince McMahon, the owner of the league. Vince McMahon basically had to go file bankruptcy, and they said, hey, if you're going to sell us, we don't want you to have no part of it. Which is crazy to think about. I guess maybe because of the lawsuits going on, and he would owe money, and you could separate it. But I think when they bought the team, they also buy their debts. Or bought the league. I think the people that bought the league, Dwayne Watrax and Danny Garcia, Redbird Capital, I think they took on all that. And now it's almost something to look forward to again if you're a fan of St. Louis. Because with the team that we had, maybe they bring him back and we still have that kind of thing. Now, he was on The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was on CNBC the other day and said we're going to have new teams, new cities, new broadcast partners, all that. Now, I was looking into it, and it wasn't like they were talking about not bringing a team St. Louis, but it's not like they were saying, hey, we're bringing back all the old teams. And it was more looking at, the article I read was more as the Houston Dallas teams, one of them maybe moving to San Antonio. Tampa Bay actually moving to a city that the old XFL had with Orlando. But it's not like he gave the city a boost of confidence. I mean, it's crazy to kind of see Twitter and see hey, Rocky, you gotta bring the Battlehawks back. We really need it. Blah, 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 this and that. And it's kind of crazy to think that they wouldn't. But if you're trying to go and make money, we're not the biggest market to make money in. And the XFL has already tried to do other stuff with expanding league, talking to the CFL, looking into international teams, talking about expanding to 10 teams, which I didn't see how that would work. I guess you just keep the same playoff system and just run with 5 teams. Look, not the biggest logistics guy. Not going to try to figure all that out. But I think if you were going to bring the league back, you would have to bring it to the city that made it look like that you were a functioning league. I mean, if you go read, and I think a lot of these people that do these XFL sites happen to be former St. Louis people. It just seems that way anyways. Like they had nothing else to do. Like they maybe ran a former Ram site and they turned it to some XFL news hub or whatever it is. So I think some of the stats might be a little... But the Battlehawks were a legitimate franchise. But you got to look at it in the way for the XFL because of the USL coming back, which doesn't make any sense to me why one of these people wouldn't get together and say, hey, I got a report here. The XFL's got a report here. The USFL's got a report already. Why wouldn't they merge together if they were going to try to put something against the NFL? Because in the long run, 2 heads are better than 1. That's what I would always think. And now you're fighting for players. Now you're going to have to look at other ways to find players, which I think the XFL was looking into. Maybe players in junior colleges and stuff like that to come and play in their league. They actually had a guy that got drafted in the NFL playing for the Battlehawks, the safety Robinson. Kind of crazy to think about. But why would they just get together? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're not going to defeat the NFL, but there's leagues you could defeat very easily if you had games in more places. I mean, it's just easy to think about. I mean, it's crazy to think the most watched hockey game, I think it was the 4th watch hockey game, only had 1.4 million viewers, and it was the Winter Classic. And I think the USFL has actually done kind of a smart thing by their first season, putting it all in Alabama, in a city that doesn't have an NFL team, and you're going to put it after all the college teams that are going on in Alabama. They don't have a major sports franchise. I mean, college football is their thing. So you could see some of the players that you've seen all throughout the whole college football season, and then you're gonna name recognition and stuff like that. That's gonna make people want to go see it. I think it was smart for them to do that because now you're basing it in one place and a place where they don't have now. They're not gonna want to. The only thing I don't get is how they're gonna vote for the teams when they know the teams are gonna move. I know that Birmingham's gonna probably get a team. But they had that all in one confined area. To where at the time you're branching your fan bases out by saying, hey, this team's going to go here, watch them here, but also make that money from the people that don't have nothing for that whole thing. In these other places, there's NBA, Memphis. There's hockey in most of these places. And I think that's a big fight for if you did get an XFL team in St. Louis. Because after the allure wears off, I mean, where are people going to spend their money? Are they going to go see the late season Blues if they're in playoff contention? Are they going to go see Blues playoffs games instead of seeing Battlehawks games? Because I know the NFL schedule's always been so weird, but you're going to think they're going to put a lot of them games on the weekend. Definitely in the times the XFL is going to want to go, which is going to be in the noon time slots. In the early in the day time slots. Early afternoon time slots. And when I was looking it up, the Blues' last game would be April 29th, and XFL's last game, if I'm right, would be April 22nd. So there's not going to be going much on after the regular season. You would say 2 games, so maybe the first or second week of May, that season's over for the XFL. And you still got a long playoff run for the Blues. But if I got money and I'm saying, do I want to see a Blues playoff game or see a XFL playoff game? I'm probably going to spend the money on the Blues. And I think that's things that the XFL are probably looking at, and probably why, after talking to the CFL and stuff like that, well, like, okay, this is where we're set now since we don't have the CFL. Let's go do the market research and all that and see how we're going to best make the money. And I think St. Louis actually would be a major part of that, because if you see what they're bringing in with the fan base, and you see that's making some kind of TV effort, I don't know what they should expect. If the Winter Classics only get 1.4 million viewers, I mean, would you say 250, 300 for a secondary spring football league? When by that time, you're going to have another one that's already up and going. So, if you got a team near these other teams, it's going to be hard to change the lines, even though these other teams ain't in the cities yet. But you know what's supposed to happen. Would it be hard to change an allegiance? And I don't think it would matter in St. Louis, because we have nothing. We have the Blues at that time. Now, the little thing that also hurts that is St. Louis FC. Well, I don't know if they'll take a bunch of fan base people, because I think soccer and football, I think the fans are a little bit different. But I think at that time, you're going to have a lot of teams to fight against. And what at the time is going to be an unknown thing. Because you don't know if it's going to be the same XFL that you've seen when Vince McMahon has it. You don't know if it's going to be how depleted the talent pool is going to be after the USFL and whatever league decides to spring up on it. I mean, there's 27,000 people trying to create spring league. I mean, every time you read something, there's, this guy used to own this, be part of the Arena Football League too, and now he's trying to run this spring league that he's been trying to run since 2010 and hasn't got off the ground yet. They were going to come back in 2018, and then the pandemic hit, and, it's crazy to read. But does bringing a team here hurt a small market city like we are? Does it hurt teams like the Ambush? They probably have enough trouble staying here as is. Does it hurt the Blues and sponsorships and stuff like that? Or St. Louis SC? There's not that much to go around anymore in St. Louis. And right now, the Blues and the Cardinals get all that. And I would think after the NFL left, I think the Blues would have picked up a lot because of sponsorships that were doing it during the winter. Probably went to the Blues, but also they could have took that Rams money and just took it to the Cardinals. And that's been the problem since day one here with sports teams in the city. Is there's just nothing to support them. And I say like this every podcast, I feel like, but the Blues fight for it every year. I mean, you look at a guy like James Neal getting released because you got a younger quality in Logan Brown, and you want to see what he's got when he's making the money he's making because you've got all these high-paid players now. With Krug and Parayko and Bunashev, and I think I'm saying his name wrong. Bunashev, whatever. Tarasenko, Bennington. I mean, it's a nice little list, and that's why you like to see the emergence of players like Thomas and Kyrie. But they're known quality now. They're known names. They're household names. And you hear a lot about them when they're bigger sports league, when the players are coming up. And I think that's what hurts St. Louis with the XFL is because you see a lot of these teams that know these players coming up. Well, you don't have a college fan base here, essentially. Because you only got Mizzou. So are we really going to, with no name recognition, like these players that, and want to go see these players that come out of college and can't make it to the NFL? Or these backup quarterbacks that can't. And nothing against Jordan Tamey. Nothing against Tyler Henneke, who's started for the Washington Redskins. P.J. Walker, another guy. Josh Johnson, who played in every league possible. Played for almost every team possible, I think. So it does build something. But when the talent pool is already deleted because of the USFL, or what goes to the NFL, are them second-rate players, now maybe even third-rate players, are they going to be up to the standards of what you're going to put out there in the field? Like, there's differences. There's some cities that are football cities, and there's some cities that aren't completely football cities. And I would put St. Louis under that second list. And there's some middle grounds in there, but St. Louis is far on that list. And say, oh, I went to every Rams, or, say we support the Rams. Well, we didn't do good enough. We're going to support the Cardinals. We've had trouble with supporting the Blues before. I mean, they've talked about moving and how many times has this team sold, and you would almost have to have everybody in the city go to a game to make either team profitable if the Cardinals just have a large fan base. And you're not going to get 3 million people to a Blues game. And that's basically what they need to survive. The playoffs is how they survive. We're lucky we have a guy like Doug Armstrong that knows what he's doing. Because if this team was in, I mean, we'd look like we'd be in the same position that the Thrashers or somebody like that's in. So can we support something else during that time? We already got to support another thing with the soccer team coming, which is a major sport, a major sports league, different than XFL, and like I said, probably different fans also. But you can't just say, hey, just because of what we did, we got a pretty chance of good, we do got a pretty good chance that we're going to get a team no matter what, right? And I think that people don't, well, you can see this and this and this, but does it make money? Is it the best thing for the people that are doing it? Is it the best thing for the XFL to have a team in St. Louis? And it makes it sound like I don't want a team or anything like that. That's the total opposite. If the Battle Fs come back, I'll be calling all over the world. It was very interesting. I mean, I watched it. I liked the XFL. I'm more basing it off a business standpoint. And how much does this lawsuit with the NFL get control of it, with the XFL wanting to get in bed probably with the NFL in some way? How does that come up with the situation? Because they had supposedly had tweeted some pictures and had what looked like an XFL logo on a piece of paper or a booklet or whatever they were doing to go to their little meetings. So after this lawsuit that they just had, does that hurt your chances? People can think about it the easy way, but kind of like with this podcast, like there's got to be a higher point. There's got to be something to it. There's got to be a way. Like if you're getting bed with the XFL or with the NFL, the XFL, that's just your moneymaker. And maybe doing that, and by putting a team in St. Louis, hurts your chances. But yeah, call, bring the Battlehawks home, all that. I'm all with it. But you gotta look at it as a standpoint for the people that make the decisions and want to make money off of this. And it's our city's fault. And hopefully that $500 million goes to something in it that we got from the Rams. Because you just don't have nothing. You don't have the support. You're running out of people. Definitely, I mean, I know that the Cardinals get people from all over the place, but you got to think that most of that core money is coming from the city. And when you're going out there and you're spending your hard-earned money, you want to watch what you want to watch, and you want to watch the best team that we got, and that's going to be the Cardinals. I would much rather spend my hard-earned money on these few Cardinal tickets to watch Arenado and Gstlsp and Wainwright and Flaherty and Yachty. And I guess by the time the XFL come back, Yachty and Wainwright are gone, but if that money's spent before, and I have it planned out for the next year, I think my money's going to the Cardinals before it goes to the XFL. And that's even in the same sense with the Blues. And the soccer team. And the minor league teams that are already here. The Ambush, I think, is the only one left. But I hope it happens. You need something. And that's another good look on the city. If we can get it here, if we can get past all the craziness you see about the city, I think it helps. And I think it puts a jolt in the state of mind of the city to be like, hey, okay, we got this. Let's keep moving up. And I don't know if the XFL team's like that end all be all. Because I think it kind of ruined your NFL thing until you probably get a new commissioner or something changes. Hopefully Bill Bidwell does something or I guess it's Michael Bidwell now. Hopefully, because it seems like a guy that's always been on St. Louis' side. But he made a money decision. So hopefully in the long, maybe a guy like that, Bidwell, gets us back in good graces. I don't know how that's going to work, but yeah, I don't think that you're going to see NFL football here anytime soon. And it would, I don't know, I don't know how, like with the lawsuit going on, how different would have been this year if they would have came back. Like that might have been like your thing if you were the XFL, like looking at stuff like that. But I don't know how it works. If you're trying to get better with the NFL, you're not going to work. You're not going to be looking at the XFL like, oh, if we get this going this year, because the XFL's got this thing in St. Louis, how much money we could make off St. Louis, or whoever other teams that the NFL's pissed about or pissed off NFL fans. But I mean, I bet they are looking like running with the Blues season. I mean, you're running right there with the biggest part of the season, the last stretch, and cutting their playoff time with your playoffs. But I don't know if they would have got the fan support with the way the Blues are doing what they're doing. And now Tarasenko can just play anywhere. Tarasenko's like the greatest thing again. If he goes on that Thomas and Kyrou line, he makes Jordan Kyrou look like the greatest player of all time. Throw him with Binochev and Barbashev, I still think I'm saying that first one wrong. And it's just something to see. And the Blues in that Winter Classic, you could kind of tell that like everybody wasn't playing that hard. You didn't see a bunch of checking. You didn't see a bunch of defense. But all of a sudden, this team looks like they're in sync. And I'm still just that little bit of worried about Bennington. It just seems like maybe that first little 2019, like, you know, he was on a hot streak. It just seems like he's just fallen off a little bit. And it really doesn't seem like he's fallen off since the pandemic hit. Like that little bit of break just kind of messed up the whole situation. And I'm talking like he's the worst goalie in the world. But it does seem like he's gotten a little more hot-headed. Like he's allowed a little bit of the easier goals in. But if you're going to score 6 a game, then hell, who cares? And then winter classic jerseys are sharp. Like, I got to get me one of those. And then I was reading today that the Blues were asked, they're going to win them 2 more times this year. So that gets you a little more sales. And they're just the better jerseys. I really just don't understand why we ever changed the clown jerseys. Just it seemed like a different jersey. It was kind of like a staple of the Blues. That was our jerseys. That was the Brett Hall, Wayne Gretzky, Adam Oates, Brendan Shanahan jerseys. And I don't think the new ones look as good. Now, if we could wear them Winter Classic jerseys, I would wear them all the time. If I own the Blues, we're wearing the road ones on the road. We're wearing, and you know, we'll come up with like that reverse retro at the Blues. I won't watch it. I mean that looks a little scary. I mean, it doesn't even look like, it looks like a ketchup red. Like, it doesn't even look like the red, you know, it's not for me. But we'll get off the jerseys. It's just crazy to think, and I was just said something about James Neal getting released earlier for Logan Brown, but they're calling up coaches now. They're calling up coaches from Springfield because your coaches got COVID, Mark Van Ryn, and Steve Ott got a back injury. And watch this guy be the greatest thing in the world. But that's how good that the Blues have been with interchanging out players. And this is just the Doug Armstrong thing. And I said it last week, and I gave you how we got the players and their ages. But you see a guy like Logan Brown stepping up. And kind of cool hometown kid. Father played for the Blues. I mean, it kind of sucks to see a guy like James Neal go like a veteran. Kind of like the Troy Brouwer type. Go out there and fight for it, and the Blues really don't have a lot of big veterans on this team. I mean, I guess you could say Tarasenko, but I mean, you got guys that do the same thing that James Neal does already with Bozak, and plus with Shin. And I don't. The problem is, I think the Blues kind of went and have too many centers, and I think that's what a lineup's arranged. That's where I think you see Tarasenko winging it up with the Kyrou and a Thomas, or going back to that first line. I mean, Kyrou's played on every line. Brendan Shin going from second line center, sometimes on the fourth line. I mean, all these parts just seem interchangeable. And I don't know if that's coaching. I just don't know if Craig Brewery's like, hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. This is how it's going to be. This is how we got to play. This is how we're going to save you for the season in the playoffs. And I don't know how that works. And I don't know how Doug Armstrong thought. Like, well, if I go get Dakota Washington or this guy or Logan Brown, well, we'll just interchange them out whenever these guys go off. And it just works seamlessly. The same thing with the goalies. But you have to send Charlie Lindgren down. It's crazy to think about, but how good Husso was playing before that. It's the best move for the team. Because either way, it was good to have one of them guys around, Husso or Lindgren. Because they're guys that you could easily interchange with the way they've been playing out with Bennington and give him some rest. It's crazy to think about almost how perfect this team is. Except on the defensive side. And you just don't have the defenseman for that. I mean, Petra was the guy. Parayko is not Petra. Pietrangelo was that defensive-minded player. I mean, Krug, Parayko, and Falk, there's three guys. Those are three offensive defensemen. Scandella's another one. Like, the only guy that you got that even, I think, that even looks like he plays defense is Ryer Bertuzzo. And I think that was a big thing with having a guy like Stanford around, even though I like Logan Brown and maybe he can become. But I think Stanford did a lot more on the defensive side of the puck and kept some of them guys that could go out there and shoot at the point and stuff like that. I think he kept them in position to be the offensive defenseman they are because he's more of a two-way guy. And I mean, and I'm talking about Zach Sanford. It'd be nice to have a guy like a Reese around here for the younger lines, for like this protected Thomas or Kyrou, just in case. I miss having Reese around. And he's the funniest guy in the world. He's funny on Twitter. He's just funny. And he can beat people up. Almost perfect. So, and people were talking about, well, what are the Blues going to look for at the trade deadline? And yeah, I would love to get a Matthew Tkachuk or a Clayton Keller, or there was somebody else out there that they were talking about. But the only guy you got to give up, that I would give up right now, would be Tarasenko. And I guess you could throw a Clausen in there, and I guess you could throw one of the other guys, but do you want to do that when you got guys going out for COVID left and right? You had some injuries. You did just release a guy that you could probably scratch and had the upper positions and maybe made a better trade. But when you're pushing the salary cap like the Blues are, there's not much you can really do to even better the team unless you get rid of a guy like a Tarasenko. I can't see any other big contract guy they would get rid of. I mean, O'Reilly, no. Parenko, no. Krug, no. Justin Falk, no. I mean, I'm running out of guys. I mean, you could look in the trading younger talent, but if you do lose a Tarasenko next year, well, maybe that's where you bring up a Clausen. Or work on the other guys in there. And also that money with interchanging guys, like I just said, and also losing that money to Tarasenko and having a guy like Peruridge down in the minors to be a defenseman. I mean, you could still go out there and get another big winger when you lose Tarasenko next year. So I wouldn't jump ahead if I was the Blues and just make a trade for this year and saying, oh, but we got Tarasenko, and we got him off the books. That's what he wanted, blah, blah. And then you actually lose something by getting rid of a guy that, in the long run, doesn't want to be here, but doesn't play like he doesn't want to be here. And I think this Doug Rogers is too smart to hurt the team. So I really can't see what you would go out there and get, but mostly what you would give up. Because the way this team plays right now, I really don't want to give anybody up. I wouldn't mind just having Dakota Joshua and Nathan Walker just sitting around. A Peruridge just sitting around if a big defenseman goes down. Clausen sitting around, a guy that you know is a goal scorer. That young can only get better. I wouldn't mind having a guy like him sitting around. Because if you're a healthy team, which they are right now, there's not too many bad spots in this lineup. I mean, unless you get caught when a defenseman playing offense, I think that's about it. Like, the goalie's really good. And, like, I was going to say shaky at times, but I don't even want to say shaky at times. It's just sometimes he allows a goal that he shouldn't allow in. You can tell it just pisses him off because when something else happens, he goes and flips out. So I can't really see the Blues going up on the trade deadline and making a change that doesn't benefit, that you don't get a good player out of, a good long-run player, not built just for this year. Because getting Tarasenko off the books shouldn't be the biggest thing at the point because he's already played here. It should be trying to get to the Stanley Cup again. So we'll see if this new coach is like an offensive or defensive genius. Maybe he's a defensive genius. Maybe he can change the defenseman. He's got Springfield Thunderbirds first place, which if you look at his record, he had a .500 record, but I was trying to, and I can't think of who else was on San Antonio, the Rampage last year, who's been on. I mean, it's hard to even, like, Try to think, well, man, we have some really good players. How were their teams so bad? I mean, just think from a couple years ago, bringing Bennington up, that was their goalie. So as long as the Blues stay healthy, I don't think that you will see any differences made in this team. I mean, if Doug Armstrong's the GM, I think he is, because you haven't heard nothing from like that he's the Tarasenko or anybody's bad in the locker room or nobody believes in. I mean, it seems like all the guys love Coach Berube. I was gonna call him Coach Chief. His nickname's Chief. So that there's just no difference to make. All right, so we're going to take a break. This is the Greater STL Sports Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Greater STL Sports Podcast, part of Street G Records LLC. I don't know what I said on that last break. I wonder if I want to go back and listen. That might be the first time I go back and actually listen to the podcast for like 5 seconds. I don't know if I said network or podcast, but it's the Greater STL Sports Podcast. All new Twitter. Gstlsp, that's Gstlsp on Twitter, and you can find us on all the podcasting sites. Look up Greater STL Sports Podcast. You'll see the new logo. You'll see some of the old podcasts, and they should all be updated by now. But if they're not, Greater STL Network still works for the podcast. Now, the COVID thing's kind of been cool in the NBA. And I guess it's been cool in hockey to see the younger guys. You get to see your systems. But it's a little different because you kind of know the players. And the basketball a little more because it's just less players on a team. Like, it's kind of cool to see that I think Deshaun Stevenson signed a contract the other day. Mario Chalmers re-signed with the Heat, which I thought was probably one of the coolest stories. The best one's ISO Joe. Joe Johnson coming back and scoring his first points off, of course, an ISO play. And I'm a big fan, big Joe Johnson fan. And for some reason, I've always been kind of like a Suns fan. I don't know if it was the Barkley days that started it, or if it was, Penny Hardaway probably made me like them even more. I like the crappy players in the NBA, and probably mostly white guys. Most of them are probably white guys. Just joking. And it wasn't always getting injured, but I think Grant Hill, was in Phoenix for a while, but they had Kidd and Steve Nash, and Shaq was there for a little bit. Those were just my teams. Amari Stoudemire was one of my favorite players. There's Steve Nash, Joe Johnson, Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion, Boris Diaw. I remember that whole team. I don't know why. Those were just kind of cool teams. And it was kind of cool to see Joe Johnson come back in the league and, doing the same thing he did at 30, he's doing at 40. And then I seen a former SLU player, got signed to the Wizards, which is kind of cool. A SLU player playing with Bradley Beal. St. Louis guy, over there in Washington. And then I get on my little great thinking things there, where my brain just starts going crazy. And I was trying to think of the last Mizzou or SLU player that had a chance to make it in the NBA. And I went through players, and I thought a lot of the good players that I used to like. With SLU, it was Kwame Marshall and Kwame Mitchell, Jordan Jett, Dwayne Evans, Hassan French. And just to think about it, the Ricky Pauldings. And I can't really think of one from Mizzou, like a legitimate player that I liked at Mizzou. Like Michael Porter was there. Great, all that. Great fun. But you knew what was happening there. And Mizzou just hasn't been fun to watch in years. Like, their best player, if you look at the 5 guys that I just came up with on SLU, I could only come up with one of Mizzou, and that was Kobe Brown. But SLU has Terrence Hargrove and Yuri Collins, Fred Davis Jr., Javionte Perkins, and then Jordan Jimerson. And I was thinking, look at the stats, and maybe with the way that Yuri Collins is point guard, and Terrence Hargrove is a pretty good player, really NBA quality players. And the last Mizzou ones I could think of are probably 2007, 2008 with the Kim English, Marcus Denman years. SLU has had, I think, the better player set up over the last few years. Definitely when they had Jordan Jett and Dwayne Evans, which I just really liked them teams from SLU. And I just think that, I don't know, maybe it's where SLU plays, or they don't get enough attention, or things like that. But I can't really think of the last Mizzou player I would say, wow. I mean, that's just the players I thought were good. I thought Kareem Rush was going to be the greatest player of all time. So, that tells you something right there. SLU, you would have to, I think, would be Larry Hughes, right? That's the last great SLU player. And that kind of sucks. Just to think about, I know it's kind of cool with Tatum and all that making it gives you somebody to root for. But it'd be kind of cool, to see the teams that you actually see on TV around here, Mizzou and SLU, and actually see, the players that you watch in the league. And Mizzou's just been out of it for a few years. And they put up quality players in the NFL, which NFL is a whole different thing, 53 players to 12 on a team. But the basketball side and football side just haven't been that good. And I don't know, it's the Eli Drinkwitz thing at Mizzou, and we'll get back to NBA. We're just going to be going on an old tangent about Mizzou. But that he's some kind of the greatest thing that ever come up. And what I don't understand is he got one player. He got the number one recruit, wide receiver, and all of the nation. Who's going to throw to him? You've seen what you're going to have next year. And playing with Tyler Cook and all that. So the funny thing about Luther, when he tweeted out after the Army game, "Don't worry, I'm coming." To do what? You gonna play running back because you're losing your running back. He might be a fun guy on kickoffs or something. Maybe we got something going there. We had a really good kicker, so we got some kind of special teams thing going. And then Mizzou basketball is just craziness. But you can get the best player in the nation. We did that in Mizzou. And he only played one game, but it didn't get us anywhere. And Conzo Martin was supposed to be this wonderful, great recruiter, blah, blah, blah. And you look up at stats and you're just like, huh? He had good years at Central Missouri. Or whatever, Missouri something, who knows? Central Missouri might have been Kim Anderson. Which one day I'm going to get on that Kim Anderson thing. How dirty they did Kim Anderson at Mizzou is crazy. Just to drop him off for a guy that's just as bad. And maybe I think because they had head coaching experiences in the Pac-10 and the SEC before. But Mizzou has not been any type of good since he's been here. You don't have a player at Mizzou you can go and look like, man, that guy's going to help us win the day. I named 5 on the SLU, and it's only 5 that I remember off the bat. And they're not game-changing players at SLU. They just know how to play a team basketball game. And, it just proves that sometimes coaching is it. And Conzo Martin's not he might be the greatest recruiter of all time, but he can't coach, obviously. Kobe Bryant, he thinks he's Kobe Bryant. I think the thing down there is go down and shoot a 3. Go down there and shoot a 3 with whoever's going to shoot. They're just not exciting to watch at all. And SLU is, I was looking up today and they said SLU is number 1 in the Atlantic 10, but they're just 1-0 in the Atlantic 10. So they're tied for first. Conference standing wise. They're still 9-4. And Mizzou has a winning record, which is unbelievable to me. But you lost to UMKC. You've lost basically by 30 points in your last 3 games. Kansas probably should have ran it up to about 130 if they really wanted to, but they figured they ran it up to enough to about 50. Illinois did you nice. Kentucky did you nice. Because you just didn't look good in them games. And it's crazy that you could think of, just even if it was crappy talent or second-tier talent, the Anthony Peelers, Kareem Rush, Doug Smith, Anthony Bonner. SLU Mizzou were producing players. And I think the SLU thing is they're just in a horrible conference. SLU should have never been in the conference that they were in when they were in Conference USA. Just if they went to the Missouri Valley, and let's just say they, even when the Missouri Valley had the teams they had, they had teams now with Davison in there, even though Wichita left. Well, I think Davison's in the A-10, excuse me. No, they're Missouri Valley. Something like that. Davison's not in Missouri Valley. They're in A-10. But just even think back and go back there and have the Wichitas and Leotas and the Central Missouri. I mean, that's the teams that you want to be around. Or they should have went to the Big Ten. And I know they're not a football school, so that probably hurts it there. But then go to the Missouri Valley Conference and be the team there. You're playing in a conference that nobody even looks at. I think SLU's underrated every year in the NCAA tournament. Like, and if you would have been in Missouri Valley, you would have had the chance to be the team every year, and I think you could still recruit there. I mean, you see what Wichita did. I don't know if you get the quality of coach. I mean, I don't think you get the quality coaches that you need to get at SLU in the A-10 either, though. I don't think you get the quality. I think it's less of a quality if you go down to Missouri State, if you go down to the Missouri Valley. But you're giving guys shots. You would be a much better team. You would be in a conference that is closer to home. You're not traveling all these East Coast games. I think it's just, and you could still play big teams. You could still, on your non-conference schedule, you still could go out there and play the Auburns and stuff like that. I don't know if Auburn's gonna want to lose to a Missouri Valley team, but they had no problem playing an A-10 team. And I think these teams will play anything just to pay. Well, we threw this halfway decent team on the schedule, so look at us. I mean, UMKC. I mean, really? So instead of playing SLU or somebody in the Missouri Valley, trying to get you play UMKC thinking that you're just going to go in there and just walk all over them with the win, and they beat you. And I think Mizzou flubbed it by going to the SEC. Because now look what you got away from is coming to you with Oklahoma and Texas talking about going to the SEC. So what you wanted to get away from because they ran this whole league, what you wanted to get away from is now coming to you. And you're no good. They're bringing 2 more teams in that are better than you. And as a football and basketball school, you could have went to any conference. I understand wanting to go to the best one, but you haven't been good. You've had no chance to beat a team that you're going to have to beat in Alabama sooner or later, and you've had 0 chance the whole time, not one shot. And then Drinkers gets brought on, and we beat LSU, and LSU is nothing, and all the stuff's going on with Orgeron, and then we beat Florida when they're nothing. And they just think, wow, we won 2 good games. He's got to be the greatest. We haven't seen that since Gary Pinkel. Barry Odom. Drinks is more excited Barry Odom. A more vibrant Barry Odom. And Grady went out there and you should be recruiting the players from Missouri. That's what I don't understand is how you don't get the players from Missouri. Or at least the surrounding areas. On either 3 of the squads. On the football squad and basketball squad, Mizzou or SLU. SLU's done a lot better job at it. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of people that just want to say, hey, I'm going to go play in the A-10 for SLU. And they're 10 times better than Missouri. Think if SLU had a football team, what kind of conference they'd be in. It would be the A-10. I would tell you they would have a pretty good shot at being in the Big Ten. And it's just so hard to watch that you don't know what net they're on CBS somewhere. And SLU's never on TV. And ESPN runs the SEC network, so Mizzou's getting some kind of prominent time. And it sucks that SLU gets the shitty end of the stick like that because they're just the better team and you don't see them anywhere. And I don't sometimes, and definitely with the deals that they got now with the NIL deals, you think it'd be a lot easier. And you still don't hear nothing. I just don't get it. And I think if you had a decent basketball team at SLU, which gets way more people than Missouri ever thought about getting in the Chaffetz Arena, if you were in a conference like the Missouri Valley where the teams are kind of known and people went to school around there and this and that, I think how much different it would be. Because you can tell this is a halfway decent basketball town too with the players that we put out from St. Louis with the Beals and the Tatums. And would we get that out of SLU if they were in Missouri Valley? We don't get it out of the A-10. But like I said earlier about the XFL and the USFL put everything in Alabama and like them, and that's a big college. It's name recognition. So Missouri State's got to be name recognition, or Southeast Missouri, whoever's in the conference. I should have looked at it a little bit more, but you'd be playing schools that people went, like I said, that went to around here, or at least heard the name, or something like that. Instead of playing the A-10 that nobody cares about. Definitely, mostly because it's an East Coast league. It's not a SLU league. And I understand the Conference USA, I don't even think it's even around anymore. So I understand the point they were probably put in at the time. But I think you had two big blunders with the two schools around here with the conference they put themselves in. The SEC just wasn't from Mizzou. Because you're getting the same recruits, and now that you're in a better league, so it doesn't look as good. It was nice to have Kansas on the schedule in football. You don't really have that in the SEC. Vanderbilt. The Mizzou's no longer as good as Vanderbilt. They thought the SEC was going to give them name recognition. Well, there's too many name recognitions in the SEC. Vanderbilt's got a good basketball team. When the kids see that on the NCAA tournament, see Mizzou loses in the first round, and see Vanderbilt doing, winning 1 or 2 games, that puts them on TV more. Also, I've heard of that school. I've heard of that school. Oh, Missouri, that was a team that lost to Norfolk State. When was the last time they were? I think they were in the tournament a couple of years for Consol's first year. But that's it. And maybe I'm just a big Travis Ford fan. Maybe he's a better version of what we want Drinkwitz to be. He's upbeat. He's not afraid to say. He plays around on Twitter. He doesn't go out and play in Star Wars costumes like Drinkwitz does. Oh, it's great. We beat a downtrodden Florida team. Let's go make fun of what they did last year to us, and let's go lose 6 games in a row. Which they didn't. I don't know what they lost in a row. But they lost to Army in a bowl game. And I'm comparing 2 sports here. But I think Travis Ford's the better coach out of all 3 of them. He's a better coach than Kynes and Martin, obviously. And from the looks of it, even a better recruiter in a non-name recognized league. To me, it ain't. It's not one of the Power 5s. And that's where you're going to go. If you had a choice, that's where you're going to go. Because even if you go to SLU and you're one of the you're like, well, I'm not going to get the TV time. People aren't going to see me and blah, blah. And I don't know if I give this chance to win a championship. But if I go to Duke for this 1 year and I'm going to go make $30 million in the NBA, well, hey, let's put myself on TV as much as I can. Let's go try to win a national championship. But if they were in the Missouri Valley or something like that, they wouldn't have to do that. And now it's never going to happen now. It could happen. I don't know how long the deals are signed for. I I think most of the contracts, I think in this, I think that was a Big 12 or 2025. So I don't know how the SEC, I don't know what Mizzou signed when they went. I mean, so it's something just to think about. Definitely if you're SLU, you'd be the bigger name in there. Definitely with Wichita no longer in there. I mean, I would just like to. I mean, I'm just a fan of all sports. So I would just like to see all sports thrive around here. And I think when the teams are good, they do. I think the only team that doesn't thrive around here, or does thrive around here when they're bad, is the Cardinals, just because. Like, well, hey, you gotta have one bad season in 20 years, and it hasn't happened yet. And SLU's been, kind of on that card. They haven't been bad, but they just haven't been good. So I just want to see one of them thrive. I'd rather it be SLU. To be honest with you, I'd rather it be SLU. I would be glad to SLU brought football back. That'd be kind of cool. The team that created the forward pass brings back their college football. And I don't know who you would get to coach, starting on that and blah blah. It's a whole thing probably. It'd be something different, and you'd have something to do. You'd have something to root for. If you don't have the NFL, and you don't have to drive 4 hours to Columbia, because it's right downtown or wherever they want to put it. I just don't understand how the teams aren't better. And I started this off by talking NBA. And it was mostly for Jordan Goodwin making it to the NBA because he's from SLU. And I got a little tangent. But it's what Mizzou's doing is embarrassing him. And sooner or later, SLU's going to pull out from under him. And I understand a lot of people go to Mizzou from here just because it's probably they probably think it's a better college. And different majors and all that. SLU School of Medicine. Nobody was playing on, there's not a lot of people going to that SLU School of Medicine from St. Louis. So it's understandable. I don't know how hard it is to get into SLU compared to Mizzou. I mean, it's probably a whole thing. I just think you would be better at what you're doing. And I think these NIL deals will change everything. I mean, people getting money while they're in college, the college teams are playing them. Now anybody can pay you. I mean, you can get sponsored. I mean, we got emos and, just the little things like that. I just want to see it thrive. That's all I'm here for. I'm here for all the teams in St. Louis to be good. Or even near St. Louis, Mizzou. Don't mind if the Chiefs are good. I just don't watch football anymore. It's just me. That's why you don't hear a bunch of NFL talk on the show. As so far. Until I run out of topics. I'm just not watching it. The Rams kind of burned me. And not that I was watching it too much before, but I was watching the Rams games at least. Well, that's going to do it for my Grandma Hicks, for Lori Paul and my Grandma Bowlesby. Love you all. For Maddie, Jake, Zach, Joe, and Rhiannon. This has been the all-new Greater STL Sports Podcast, part of Street G Records, LLC.